Okay.
I still don't.
Okay.
So this is the fourth way of solving quadratic equations, and it's called completing the square. All right, it's got a certain set of steps, and these steps you'll do every single time. I'm going to explain why we do each step, but in the long run, if you just don't understand the whys, just remember each step, okay? Because it will work every single time. I originally had it set as your quiz to be Friday, but instead it's going to be Monday, so that you can have 2 extra days to go home and practice and study. Okay, so that means we're going to practice in class Thursday and Friday. Okay, to make sure that you fully understand all 4 methods. Okay, I'll give you something extra to take home if you choose to do it. You don't have to; it's not required, but I would highly recommend that you do it. All right. That way you've got extra practice in so that when you get in class on Monday, you're good to go. Yes, Kate?
Do you want me to just take the notes at home? Like, do you have a video thing?
Just wait. It didn't work. And then my iPad's not been working. So I'm having to use a different application to record. So I'll get you caught up tomorrow. Because that's another reason why we're doing 2 days of it.
A lot of people are getting sick. It's not my fault.
I know.
Not just me.
I know, it's fine. All right. So completing the square. So when we're completing the square, this is another method when it won't factor for us. Okay, so remember our initial way of trying to solve a quadratic equation is always going to be by factoring, because that's usually going to be the easiest way. Sometimes it won't factor, so that's when we use the quadratic equation or completing the square. And there's situations where you need to complete the square because of what it's going to make for us. Okay? And you'll learn in Algebra 2 all those reasons of like why you need to complete the square to make things work. Because we're just not going to get to that part of it now. But again, all math builds, right? You're learning how to do this now so that when you get to Algebra 2, you'll already know how to do it so that teacher doesn't have to spend 2 weeks just teaching you how to complete the square. All right? Okay, so the first problem, we do a squared plus 2a minus 3 equals 0. All right, so you remember when I taught you about the special products and how we have what's called a perfect square trinomial?
Yeah.
So the first number is a perfect square and the last number is a perfect square, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we're trying to turn this into. Okay? So that's our first number 1 goal, is to make this a perfect square trinomial. Is this a perfect square?
Yes.
Yes. But is this?
No.
No. Okay, it's not. So this C, okay, because remember we've got A, B, and C, right? Mm-hmm. This C is not a perfect square. So what we're going to do is we're going to move it to the other side so that it's no longer there. We can't just completely get rid of it, right? Because then it's no longer an equation. We just have to rearrange it.
Wait, what makes it not a perfect square?
This 3, because the 3 is not a perfect square. So a perfect square is when you take one number and multiply it times itself. So like 2 times 2 would make 4. So 4 is a perfect square. 6 times 6 is 36.
Like 9 is 3.
So 36 is a perfect square. Right, 9 is a perfect square because 3 times 3. But the only factors of 3 are 1 and 3, and they're not the same number. So that's not a perfect square. You can take the square root of it, but it's not going to give you a whole number answer. And we want to have whole number answers and not decimal answers. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to move this C to the other side, okay? And again, you can't just take things and just willy-nilly move them around, right? You have to do it mathematically. So how are you going to move a negative 3 to the other side? You got to plus the 3.
Or add.
Right. So it goes away here. And I'm going to have a squared plus 2a. Now, again, my goal is to make a new C, right? So I'm going to leave a spot open.
Wait, C?
Yeah, remember A, B, C?
Oh.
Okay, so I'm trying to get a new C, so I'm going to leave a spot open for that new C right there. And then 0 plus 3 makes 3, okay? So I just moved that over because I'm trying to get rid of the old C so I can make a new one. All right? Now, to find our new C, you remember the perfect square trinomial, how you could check the middle number to see if it worked? We would take the square root of the first, the square root of the last, and
add
multiply and
double.
double them, right? So, and that would make the middle number. Well, we're gonna kind of do that same thing, but backwards. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna take half of the middle.
Mhm.
Okay, so that the middle is B, isn't it?
Mhm.
Okay, so B, and taking half would mean to divide it by
2.
2. So B over 2, and then we're going to square it. Well, what is our B?
Just two.
Remember, B is
but
the
if
number
you
in
wanna
front of
add
A, the number in front of X, in this case, A, right? So 2. So 2 over 2 squared. Well, what is 2 divided by 2?
1.
And what is 1 squared?
1.
Okay. So we're going, and it'll always be adding right here. So we're going to add 1, and that's our new C. Okay?
Wow.
And this is how you find your new C.
And
How'd
one
you
is
get B
equal
over
to
2 again?
That's just, it's basically going backwards. So we would have taken the square root of both sides, right?
Yep.
Multiply them. Okay? And then doubled them. So doubling means to multiply by 2, right? Okay, so the opposite of multiplying by 2 is the dividing by 2. So I'm dividing that middle by 2. And then we would have taken the square root of the outsides, right? Well, the opposite of square rooting is squaring. So I'm basically doing that whole thing backwards. Okay, so you divide by 2 first, and then you square it. Okay, so, and you can memorize it that way. You don't have to memorize B over 2 squared. You can just memorize take half and square.
So what is it?
And that step right there is called completing the square. That is the completing the square part. We're not done, but
I have multiplied by 2. You said the number was 6.
half of 6 is,
Okay,
squared is
you're dividing B. in
3
half.
squared,
So half is divided by 2,
9.
and the B is 2, so 2 divided by 2 is 1.
So what if the middle was 10? Half of 10 is,
5.
squared is 25, and that would be your new C. But now listen. Okay, so now listen, this is called a what? What's right here?
An equal sign.
So this is an equation, right?
Mhm.
Which means so an equation works just like a scale, right? Like the scales where you got them balanced.
Mhm.
If I'm gonna add 1 rock over here, what's gonna happen to it?
I'll go down.
It's gonna go down and this side's gonna go up. So did I keep it equal?
No.
No, so if I'm gonna add 1 rock here, I have to also add 1 here. So again, what we do to one side, we have to do it. So if I'm gonna add 1 right here, I have to add 1 here also. Okay, that's just your basic math. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So again, this is again like the whole makeup scenario, right? We put makeup on to change the way that we look, but does it change who we are? No. Okay? I'm changing the way this equation looks, but I'm not changing what it is. If I just put a plus 1 on one side and not the other, I changed who it was. Okay? We don't do that. We have to keep it the same. We're just making it look different. All right. Now, the whole reason, so we just completed the square. The whole reason that we needed to make a perfect square trinomial is because what does a perfect square trinomial factor into?
Binomial.
A binomial square. So 1 parentheses with a square. Okay? What's the square root? Then we take the square root of the first and the last, right? What's the square root of a squared?
A.
A. What's the square root of 1?
1.
And then we take the middle sign, which is a
1.
plus this time. So now we have a plus 1 squared equals, what is 3 plus 1?
4.
4. All right, so we just made it go from having an a squared and an a to just an a, right? And that's the point of this, is we're trying to get it down to where there's just an a, because we can't solve it when there's an a squared and an a, right? We can't get just one of those by itself. So the whole point in doing this is to go from having an a squared to just an a. But the a is trapped inside the parentheses, isn't it?
Mhm.
Okay? What is keeping me from being able to work inside that parentheses?
Yeah.
Yeah, the square right here. Okay? So it's kind of like a prison cell, sort of. All right? Where they're trapped inside and it's locked with the square. How do you unlock a square? for the square root, okay? So the only way to get rid of a square is to take the square root first. So you have to unlock it before you can open up the door, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, nobody can walk out of something if the door's locked. You gotta unlock it first. And the only way to unlock a square is take the square root. But again, what we do to one side,
You have to do
we
it.
have to do to the other. Okay? So remember, adding is the opposite of subtracting, right? Which is why up here, when I did that, they canceled out, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So if square rooting is the opposite of squaring, then what's gonna happen to the square root and square? They're gonna cross out. And you're now left with a plus 1. The door is now open, and you just have a plus 1 here. I know, that's why I said we had, so I'm gonna give y'all some extra days.
I didn't catch that. Why did you cross it out?
Because square rooting is the opposite of squaring, just like adding is the opposite of minusing, so we crossed them out, right?
So if you had done the square root, but it was a plus 4, would it change the whole thing?
Because they cross out before it ever has a chance to do anything on the inside.
Uh-huh.
All right, so I'm left with a plus 1 equals, and what is the square root of 4?
2.
And,
-2.
so we're gonna have two equations. A plus 1 equals 2, and a plus 1 equals -2. And now there's only one step in each one left, right? What's the only thing keeping a from being by itself in both of them?
Plus 1.
So we have to,
-1.
Yeah.
so those cross out. What is 2 minus 1?
1.
Those cross out. What is -2 minus 1?
-3.
Thank you for not saying -1. Appreciate you. Now, I know that was a lot, which is why we're gonna spend this whole class period working these problems. This is why I saved this one for last.
I kind of wish we would have done this one first.
Yeah.
Or like
We're gonna
maybe-
have plenty of time to practice them. The other ones were pretty simple. It was just a matter of like the first one, the square root one. That's just solving a normal equation, right? The only thing different is at the end, you take the square root. All right? The factoring one, you already know how to factor. The only thing that we added was your answer is the opposite of the parentheses, right?
Mhm.
So you already know how to do that. The quadratic formula, you literally plug in and type in a calculator, right?
Mhm.
Okay? This is the only one that's completely different and completely new. The other three were not difficult, okay?
Correct, they were very easy.
They were very easy, okay? If I'd done this one first, I would have wanted to spend 3 days on just practicing this. Had to get the easy ones in first, Monday.
Monday.
When's our test?
Your quiz is gonna be Monday, and then the test I'm gonna make Wednesday.
Oh, so you extended it.
I extended it. Your test was originally gonna be Tuesday,
And the quiz was Friday?
and the quiz was gonna be this Friday, yeah.
That's weird.
And I'm just gonna teach the entire chapter 8 in one day, because it's that easy.
Okay. Just
Yeah, we went from 7 to 9 because they're the most similar, because I could just say, you just learned factoring, now let's just add a step to it, right? Instead of teaching chapter 8 and then having to go back and remember all of it. In chapter 8, it'll take us 1 day to learn.
This is your last time teaching
What is
this at BCA.
What is chapter 8?
Graphing these.
Oh,
Ew.
Again,
It's
it's so easy. You're literally gonna make a T-chart,
Uh,
and you're gonna plot
It's so-
points and connect the dots.
What is it? No
Okay.
But like, why?
I like graphing this. It's so
Why is it a U and why
Except
is it
for
not a
when
V?
that one time when I
Because
like
these
made
absolute
up my
values.
own problem. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Where like you asked a question and I made up my own question in my head and answered it
Oh, yeah.
on my test.
Or,
And I
no,
got
you
like a
did the
48
question.
on
It was like answer it and she like crafted.
Oh, yeah.
And I
She drew
made
her own
my
graph.
own graph.
You did. You made your own graphs and everything, and then I had to start clarifying. If there's not a graph on the question, probably doesn't want you to graph. All right, so let's do another one.
Okay.
I know, it's just gonna
It's
take
not
practice.
that hard, it's just a lot of steps.
It is, that's why I say, that's why I'm trying to take, okay, that's why I'm trying to explain each little thing as we go and like why we do it, to try and help you understand. But again, if it gets down to it, you can just memorize the steps, because it's the same steps every time. Every problem we do, it'll be those same steps. X squared minus 2x minus 8 equals 0. And you'll never have a number out front. So I'm never gonna make it where it's a hard one on these, it'll always be easy ones, mainly because we're only gonna have a short amount of time to do it. Your algebra 2 teacher can deal with that.
Yeah, I definitely already forgot how to find that.
Alright, so remember our first goal here is to get a new C, right? A C that'll actually be a perfect square, correct?
Yeah.
Is our current C a perfect square?
No.
No. So I need to move it where?
Right.
To the other side. How do I move a minus 8 to the other side?
Add 8.
And I add 8. So that's gonna leave me with x squared minus 2x, leave a space, equals 8. Now we have to actually do the completing the square part. Because again, we call it completing a square because we're trying to turn it into a perfect square trinomial, right? We've got one perfect square, but now we need to complete it and have another perfect square.
Okay.
So remember, to do this part, this is where you take half of the middle.
So you do 2 divided by 2.
So half of 2 is,
And then squared.
Squared.
1.
okay, and it'll always, because everything squared is positive, so it'll always be a plus, and then what was it? 1. But what we do to one side,
You have to do the other.
so if I'm gonna add 1 there, I have to add 1 here.
How do you
You take half of the middle, so half of 2 is,
1.
and square it. And 1 squared is half the middle and square.
Yeah, I got
What
a weird
was
answer too, so we stopped there. But I really forgot the part, like.
You already solved it?
I got 4, negative 4.
Alright, so, so next, the whole reason, Kate,
You're commenting on my feet.
I don't care, please just, I need you to pay attention, this is not a time, this is not a time for y'all to be goofing off and not paying attention. Alright? The only thing y'all need to be looking at is this board or your paper. Are we clear, Ben?
I've been doing that.
So the whole reason we did that was so that this would be a perfect square trinomial so that it will factor into a
Binomial square.
binomial square. Then we take, so what's gonna go in the first spot?
X.
X. What goes in the second spot?
1.
And what's the middle sign?
Minus.
It's a minus this time. Alright? Equals, and what is 8 plus 1?
9.
9. Can we do anything inside the parentheses yet?
No.
No, we have to get rid of what first?
X square.
The square. How do you get rid of a square?
Square root.
Square root, yes, Ben.
What did you do with the 2?
It's hidden inside of here. Okay, this is the whole reason why in chapter 7, you had to learn how to factor this.
Oh.
Because I don't have time to go back and explain chapter 7.
Oh, I mean,
So what we do to one side,
We got
Have to do the
other.
so what's gonna happen to the square and the square root?
It's gonna cancel out.
They're gonna cancel out, okay? Again, it doesn't matter what's inside of here, right? The square root cancels out the square before it ever had the chance to do anything. When you unlock a door, is it affecting the people on the inside? Does it change them to something else?
No.
No, it just opens the door, right? That's all unlocking a door does,
I
it
mean, like if
opens the
they're
door.
werewolves and full moon, they might come out circling on werewolves.
Anyway, so all that's left now is the x minus 1,
And then equals 3.
but the square root of 9 doesn't just equal 3, it also equals,
Negative 3.
so x minus 1 also equals negative 3. So that's gonna be the part that you're gonna forget the most, is that you have to have 2
And
equations. And then what do we do to get rid of the minus 1?
add 1.
3 plus 1 is,
4. 4.
how do we get rid of this minus 1?
Plus 1.
And what's negative 3 plus 1?
Negative 2.
Negative 2.
I got it right.
I thought you said 4 and negative 4 a while ago.
I did, but then like I went back and
Oh,
fixed it. So you got it wrong.
wow, I'm actually
Yeah, the first one.
not stupid.
I am stupid.
Would you say this is kind of fun?
No.
Oh.
That's exactly what you said.
No, I'm not.
No, of course
Math
not.
is not fun. I'm saying it's kind of fun that I'm not stupid.
Oh.
Oh, math is fun.
No, you're
No.
still stupid.
I think some math.
I'm kidding.
Can we do one like dumb
Like back?
Yeah, I'm just gonna put another one up. Guys.
It's a stupid question.
Guys.
Wait,
Shut your pie holes.
Are you?
Okay, what part of shut your pie holes did you not understand? Shut your mouth. Yes, Rebecca.
Was it like what we did in the last chapter?
This right here.
Yeah, the parentheses.
Take the square root of this and the square root of this. Because they have to be perfect squares. That's the whole reason that we make this into a perfect square. Because there's not a square root of 8, right? So that's why we had to move it to the other side and make a new one. And you know how we got this number, right? Okay. Girls, why is it even in her
I
hair?
don't know, Jordan. I was ready.
Y'all. Where's the problem? You're trying it by yourself this time.
Good lord. Wait, you divide it by 2, then square
Do
it.
half it and then square it.
Which number do you have?
The middle one, so the one that's next to the X.
What if you can't square it?
You can square anything.
But you don't get a whole number every time.
Come on. Which time out there? Thank you.
Half of 16 is 8.
Hold on a second.
And 8 squared is, you're getting square and square root mixed up. You're squaring the 8, so 8 times 8.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I did it wrong.
Yeah, it's helpful.
All right. First thing we need to do is get rid of what?
The
22. Right, the minus 22. How am I going to get rid of the minus
plus
22?
20.
Plus
Add
22. So now we've got x squared plus 16x, leave a space, equals
23.
I think
22.
it's plus
22.
64.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
So to get our new c, we have to do what?
Divide.
Take half the middle and square it. So what's half of 16?
8.
8.
And 8 squared is
64.
64. And are we going to add it or subtract it?
Add it.
Add it. It'll always be.
See, I just
Right.
did 1 because I didn't know how to do it and I thought all of the wrong one.
You take half the middle and square it. And what I do to one side,
You
so
gotta add
if I'm going to add 64 here, I have to add 64 here.
Now,
This part right here is what's going to mess y'all up,
Okay.
okay? Because some of you are going to put it here, but you're going to forget to do it here, and you're going to get some weird decimals.
Well, I got to
I
that,
got it.
but then I got a decimal.
That's okay. All right, so the whole reason we did this was so it would factor into a what? A binomial squared. Okay, what's the square root of x squared? X. What's the square root of 64?
8
8. What's the middle sign?
plus.
Plus. Now remember, this 16 is still in here, it's just hidden, right? Okay, because remember, 8 times 1 would make 8, and 8 doubled is 16. So it's in there, you just can't see it. And what is 22 plus 64?
86.
86. And we immediately notice that 86 is not a what?
Perfect square.
Perfect square. And that's okay. Okay, you can get decimals on here.
Dang it.
Oh, it's always so
Alright.
much more confusing.
It's okay. You have a calculator that's going to do it for you. Now, how do I get rid of the square?
You put it.
You put a
You
square root.
square root it. And what you do to one side.
Have
Yeah,
to do
do
the
the
other.
So, am I going to square root the 8?
No.
No. The square and the square root cancel, and all that happens is the door opens, right? Leaving us with just
X plus
x plus 8 equals, and what do you get? Should you get 9.32?
9.2736.
So 9.3.
What was 9.2?
Right, so the 7 makes a 2, go up to a 3. So 9.3, and we took the square root of
And
86.
now,
in our
oh, that
So
does
you,
make
so
sense.
square root, you
Go second x squared.
So when you at first Oh.
You have to press second x squared first, Ben,
Okay, got it.
and then the 86. What page?
So always when you like take away the first like when we took away the 22 and we plus the 22 to the other side, you always have to like
Get a new number here.
yeah like how do you do that again?
Take half of the middle and square it. So half of 16 is,
80.
and 8 squared is,
That's not 64. 64.
you're thinking of
Oh.
square rooting. You square it. Yep. All right, am I done?
No,
No, because it's x by itself.
no,
No. So how do I get rid of the plus 8s?
minus 8.
Minus 8. Oh, that is so confusing. Oh no.
9.3 minus 8 is
1.3.
1.3. Negative 9.3 minus 8, remember you just add them, right?
Mhm.
So 9 and 8 make
Negative 17.
negative 17.3. Those would be your answers. So were y'all able to get at least a little ways by yourself?
Yeah, a little. I got until the square root of like the 86.
I just got the
Me
pieces
too.
together.
I got to the second one.
Everyone else they got it.
All right, that's okay. The goal is to be able to get further and further each time by yourself. All right?
Okay, I'm about to get this one right. Are y'all ready?
Are you ready?
I'm gonna get this
All
right.
right, go for it. Those noises aren't necessary.
Okay, I forgot how to do it.
That didn't last long.
No, I'm kidding.
Hey, are you working on paper? Are you working on paper?
Yeah.
Go back and look at your other problems.
I was joking.
Yeah, shh. Don't worry about it. I wasn't talking to you then. It's not important.
Wow. I'm done. I think I did it wrong.
Oh, you're supposed to get another decimal.
Did you
I didn't.
Yeah, you have your decimals on this one?
Oh, I could have. No, I didn't. Actually, yeah.
If you're done, please don't talk.
How did you?
Is it okay that I got 2 negative answers?
Yeah, that's I got it
I
right.
was about to say it better be. 'Cause that's
I just forgot the first one.
I got it right. Let's go.
Okay, so it doesn't. So just because those other square root problems we did, we got 1 positive, 1 negative, it doesn't necessarily mean that's gonna happen here. Mainly because we got our positive and negative here, but then we're doing more math to it later, and it could change that, right? See, this was just barely changed, okay? It went from being positive 2 to negative 2, but that's okay. You can have 2 negatives, and you can also have 2 positives. We ready for another one? Does anyone have any questions on this one?
Yes.
Yes, what's your question?
Okay, so what I did wrong
Okay.
was I saw that it was a plus 12, so I thought we didn't have to do anything.
No, because the reason we had to do something to it, Kate, is because we need both of these numbers to be perfect squares. X squared is a perfect square because it has a square on it. But is 12 a perfect square? No, because because there's not a number that we can times itself to get 12.
Oh,
Like 6 times 6 is not 12. So we had to get rid of it so that we could get our perfect square of 16.
This isn't that hard after all.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of steps.
You think it's that hard?
I keep on getting them wrong, so. Obviously, it's hard to me.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah, it is overwhelming.
It's just a lot of steps. It's really,
Like at first.
yeah, at first it was a little overwhelming because it was something that you weren't used to. It was basically combining everything you've done this year into one
Well.
problem.
Okay, I'm gonna do this right this time, alright?
You do that.
I'm not copying.
You're gonna have to use one of these.
Yeah, she's the first.
They keep saying donate error.
It's just not possible.
Can you not square or square root a negative number?
No.
Okay,
You
so-
probably, and you shouldn't have gotten a negative number.
It's get better.
No, but negative 12, half of that.
Right, you don't take half of the negative 12, you just take half of the 12.
Oh, you got
Yeah.
Wait.
So we're gonna use the negative later.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, you keep the negative.
Why you take the positive?
Because really, anytime you square something, you're gonna get positive anyway. So the negative's gonna get changed to positive regardless. So to avoid confusion, we just do the positive. So, because if you don't type it in the calculator correctly, your calculator will give you a negative answer. But we don't want a negative answer. When you type it in the calculator, that's probably fine.
I got.
Yeah, I don't think there's any factor than 26 that adds equal 12, so that's probably right.
Yeah, I could really use some food.
I know. I should have eaten more oatmeal this morning.
I don't eat breakfast.
How do you not eat breakfast? My parents
I don't
think
eat breakfast.
I don't know how many
You should not eat breakfast. We got eggs, we got bacon, we got
I
sausage,
hate
we got
cereal.
biscuits.
Y'all basically have a heart attack.
We eat cereal.
Yeah.
See, I used to get cereal every morning, so it made my stomach, and I'm lactose intolerant, but I didn't
Alright.
find out until. I know.
Guys, when I say shh, that doesn't mean finish your sentence. That means stop. And you can finish it later. It probably wasn't really that important.
Don't be okay with
All right, again, we're not gonna look at the negative here because you have to type, if you're gonna do a negative, you have to type in the calculator correctly, okay? Because half of 12 is what?
6.
But what's half of negative 12?
Negative.
Negative 6. In your calculator does everything exactly like it's supposed to. Okay, so if you just type negative 6 squared, remember how the square is only on the number directly in front of it unless it's in parentheses?
Yes.
Your calculator sees that this square is only on the 6, so it's not squaring the negative. So that's why it's giving you negative 36. If you're going to use the negative, you have to type any negative in the calculator with a parentheses so that it squares the negative and the 6. So to avoid that completely, we don't look at the negative here because everything squared is supposed to give us a positive, right? And that's also why I clarified here, this will always be a plus because everything squared is positive. So half of 12 is,
6.
and 6 squared is,
36.
so we're going to
Plus
Plus
36.
plus 36 to both sides.
I think I got this one right.
All right, the whole point in doing this was to make a what?
Binomial square.
A binomial squared. X squared turns into
X.
X. 36 goes back to
Plus 6.
6. And what's the middle sign?
Minus.
Now, this is where the negative comes into play. Okay? So we use the negative here. That's where the sign comes back for us, all right? So we're taking care of the negative in this step and just kind of ignoring it up here. And what is negative 26 plus 36?
Negative 62.
Positive 10.
Positive 10.
3 and 3, negative.
Uh-oh.
Even if it, wait,
Dang
oh,
it, I know I got
If you
it right.
subtracted, then
I
it
did
would.
it on my calculator. But I put the wrong sign. That's so frustrating.
All right, so now we have to take the square root of both sides.
yes.
So the square root and the square cancel, leaving me with x minus 6. And what is the square root of 10? It's going to be 3.2. And?
Negative 3.
And negative 3.2. So what do we do now?
Plus 6,
Plus 6.
9.2, and 6.
That's a general idea.
Yeah, well, I got it right if I hadn't done it.
So 9.2 and
2.8.
2.3, what?
2.8.
God,
You
that's
subtract. What do you do, put negative?
No, what did I do? I don't know what I did.
I'm not sure either.
Not gonna do.
6 minus 3 is 3, and 3 minus 0.2 is 2.8. I'm taking 20 cents away from $3.
Oh.
What time is it this time?
Time for you to get
Not
washed
really.
up.
We still have 10 minutes.
That's a good original joke. Shut up, Andrew. Shut up.
All right, let's do another one. Practice makes progress.
Practice
Never make one die.
That's what I just said, man.
Yeah, I know. Just think.
It's easy.
You can excuse me.
I am sitting, aren't you?
You can say that.
It says 20, I'm not really sure why it did that, but.
Too long.
As your final answer?
Thank you.
I just guessed, but I just.
Not right.
I mean, I just guessed. But
One should be right.
If it's random.
It's not.
You already know the answer?
Yes.
How do you?
She has
You
She's a
gotta
math
tell me
teacher.
She's the patch of math.
Negative 10 and negative 2.
Oh, wait, never mind. I just did the last one.
I said, how did you do that?
This one will factor.
Wait, if you're finding the square root of negative 20, is it going to be a positive?
You should be finding the square root of anything negative, that means you did something wrong.
I know I did back. No. Buddy.
Okay.
is it too?
I'm not doing completing the square in my head really fast, okay? Again, I look and I ask myself, are there factors of 20 that add to make 12? 10 and 2. And so it becomes the opposite, negative 10 and negative 2. However, on your quiz, you have to do it by completing the square.
Wait, hold up. How did you say you just did it?
By factoring.
Why don't we just
Backing the 20 that added to make 12. But you're gonna have to do the completing the square part, but that's how you can check yourself.
Oh my gosh.
It's okay, we're probably gonna.
Did all of our completing the square problems give us exact answers?
Yes.
No.
No, we had some decimals, didn't we?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we do this for the decimal ones, okay? Sometimes I'll give you one that works out evenly, and you can check yourself by seeing if it factors, but you have to actually work it out the way I tell you to on the quiz, all right? Otherwise, you miss, I'll give you half credit for getting the answers right, but then you're gonna miss a whole half credit for doing it the wrong way.
But how do you get the negatives?
Because I see
how
that
do you
everything's
know?
positive, and remember when we saw about factoring, it becomes the opposite of what's on the inside. It's the opposite of positive 10 and positive 2 is negative 10 and negative.
No, but how do you know that?
Remember when we set the parentheses equal to 0? So you'd have x plus 2 equals 0 and x plus 10 equals 0. To get rid of the plus 2, you would.
But I thought when we factored, when we did.
Right, but when you solve by factoring, you then have to set the parentheses. All right, here we go. Who did not get -2 and -10 and needs me to work it out?
Well, I was close to getting 2 negatives.
All right. First thing we want to do, stop talking. We want to get rid of the plus 20, so we
Minus 20.
minus 20 from both sides. X squared plus 12x, leave a space, was -20. Then we take half of the middle, so half of 12 is,
6.
and square it,
36.
and we add that every time, but we have to do it to both sides. The whole reason that we do this is so that we can make a parentheses squared, a binomial squared. To get what goes inside, we take the square root of the first, so the square root of x squared is, and square root of the last, square root of 36 is,
6.
and then we take the middle sign, which is a plus. And then we actually add -20 and 36 and get positive
4.
16.
Oh, I don't know why I said 4.
If you ever get to this part and you have a negative here, you did something wrong, okay? I'm gonna make it where you always would get a positive, you would always get an answer, all right? So if you get a negative, you done messed up, A wrong. Now, how do we get rid of the square?
You square root it.
Square root, and what we do to one side, so the square root and the square cancel, leaving us with x plus 6 equals, what is the square root of 16?
4.
And
-4.
x plus 6 equals -4. And then how do we get rid of a plus 6?
Minus
-6.
which equals x equals -2 and x equals -10. And I got it right. Boo y'all.
All right, one more.
One more in 3 minutes.
Sorry. You can do it.
Okay, we gotta go fast.
We don't finish by 5:55.
Would you just work it? And I just miss you, not the bell, so.
And 5:55 is 8 hours.
Work it.
And 5 isn't like 8 hours. You know, so you know what time. You can't leave.
All right, I want to see everyone working this problem, please.
Oh, crappers.
Make sure we're working this problem, girls.
Oh dear.
Zoe, make sure, Zoe and Tatum, make sure y'all are working this problem, please. We'll need a little bit more room than that. You should all have it written down on your desk, so I'm just gonna go ahead and start working it, because y'all shouldn't be looking up here anyway.
And
When you're done, don't do anything, just sit there. So don't start packing up, because then you just make everyone start packing up.
Haley. Of course it's Haley.
Oh, 5 minutes between classes, you got plenty of time to pack up when that bell rings and get to your class, as long as you don't have to walk and chit chat and gossip and all that good stuff.
We don't.
Yeah, everyone knows going.
The only good stuff in my life is Jesus Christ.
No, the Miss Barnes. Mr. Barrington to the high school office. It's not right. I just want talking.
Alright, cool.
We got a 12 and -4. And in the beginning, I could tell if that was gonna work, the factors of 48 that subtract to make 8 are 12 and 4.
Y'all, I got it right.
So that at least tells me that I'm on the right track. Go pick it up.
Can we check ourselves by the quadratic formula too?
Yes, you can also check yourself by the quadratic formula.
There's somebody like iced coffee in there that's like, ooh.
All right, you may pack up now. I